The session today is going to be around clothing, and what I'm really going to focus on is difficulties with getting clothing on from a sensory point of view. So there will be many different reasons why you might not be able to get your child or adult to put on clothes, but because it's such a big topic today, we're just going to focus specifically around the sensory difficulties that your child or adult might be having. Okay, so we know, if you have any questions as well, drop them in the comment box. We know that for many of our individuals, they will have hypersensitivities to tactile. So tactile is everything to do with your skin. So it's where there's too much information and the child or the adult can't process it. It's just too much stuff coming in, basically. So if you imagine yourself with a really itchy jumper on, if anyone's ever wore a jumper and you've kind of got to work and thought, this is really itchy and it's driving me driving me up the wall a little bit. What you will do is you'll get used to that feeling at some point, so that itch will almost disappear. You might itch at first for a little bit, but then it'll disappear because your brain will get used to that sensation. For some of our individuals, that sensation is still felt all the time. So you can imagine how frustrating that might be and how annoying it would be as well if you could constantly feel that itch and your brain couldn't kind of cancel it out in somewhere. Okay, so that's what we kind of start from, I suppose, when we start looking at hypersensitivities is how does it relate to ourselves and what would that feel like to us. Okay, so children and adults with hypersensitivities from a tactile point of view, you might see resistance to being touched, resistance to brushing teeth or combing hair, might not want to be near people because people tend to be unpredictable and they might actually touch them. They might find it very difficult getting into bed under a duvet or lying on a sheet. Might have a problem in certain environments, like swimming might be difficult for them because of the feel of the water, or the feel of going outside and the wind or the rain. Anything like that could cause a problem for someone who's hypersensitive. The other big kind of challenge that we find is clothing. So we know for some of our families that we work with, clothing is a big challenge. So we have service users that will refuse to wear clothes at all and will strip them off at any given opportunity that they can find. You have some service users that will only wear the same clothes over and over again and won't divert from that. We've got some service users that will really struggle in school, so where there's a demand to wear a school uniform, you might find challenges around actually putting that on in the morning for one thing or another. Difficulties getting changed and dressed for PE could be problematic because again you're putting a different kind of tactile experience onto your body, and lots of other challenges which I'm sure people can relate to. So if you have got any specifically, please drop them in the comments box below. Okay, so some of the things that we need to think about when we start looking at kind of difficulties around clothing. If it's a sensory difference that's happening, we need to really work with our children and adults to find out what it is from a sensory perspective. So if you think about yourself putting on, you're going out and you're putting your top on, you're putting your new top on. Okay, the new top will have a certain smell. So it might be that you've used some beautiful fabric conditioner and it has the smell of, I don't know, fresh meadows or whatever it is. Okay, so you've got the smell. You've also got the feeling of how that top feels. So it might be a silky top, which is quite soft, or it might be a different fabric, which is quite harsh on the body. Okay, you've also got the way that that top sounds. So different clothing will sound quite different, okay, and even though we don't notice it, for our service users they may actually pick up on that noise. Okay, so if you imagine having a really the shell suits that people used to wear years ago, that sounded actually, you could hear it, couldn't you? You could hear it crinkling. Now we're able to cancel that out and ignore it, but for somebody with hypersensitive auditory information happening, that might be too much for them. Okay, so if you think about one top alone, there's all that sensory information coming in, and I suppose one of the biggest ones there is obviously how it feels against your skin. So it's really important that you work with your child or adult to find out what they can tolerate and do it quite slowly. So it might be that you keep a diary or a chart, and every time they tolerate a different fabric, you actually one parent I work with would have a little chart and she'd cut out a little bit of the fabric, which I know can be obviously costly, but she would put it on a little chart so that she knew that her child was fine with cotton, but was working towards being okay with, I don't know, silk or wool or whatever it might be. Okay, so Also remember about wherever possible, put them in control of their experience, because being in control of it will reduce that level of unpredictability and therefore will reduce the level of anxiety, okay? So if we are in control of our environment, we will feel safer, and that's exactly the same with issues around clothing from a sensory point of view, okay? Trial and error, and don't beat yourselves up too much about it. So that a lot of the families I work with are constantly beating themselves up, saying, well, you know, he had a bag of quavers for breakfast. Now I'm really, really upset about that, and that makes me a bad mother. Absolutely not, because it might be that your child has refused to eat for 3 weeks. So you've actually got him to eat a bag of quavers at breakfast, which yes, we know isn't ideal, but actually it's fantastic because your son's just had something to eat, okay? It's exactly the same with food, with clothing. So if they will only wear that, you know, stripy top that they've worn for the last 3 weeks, well, you know, kind of pick your battles and know as a parent, you know, why you're allowing them to wear that, and try and communicate that to other people as well, particularly in schools and things like that. Okay, so trial and error works really well, and maybe look at you know, getting clothes, you know, if you've got family members, getting them to give you clothes that other children might have worn, so that you're not constantly spending money on new fabrics to see if your child can actually tolerate them. Okay. Think about your tags and seams. So we know that tags and seams can be a big problem. To us, we ignore them. We kind of forget that they're there. But for our service users, they might constantly be feeling them. So I know Marks and Spencer's have done a new clothing range last year, which introduced kinds of softer fabrics. They have a lot of use of soft velcro as opposed to buttons, because we know buttons can be problematic. The curl labels are actually on the inside of the pocket of the trousers and things like that, just so that you're minimising that kind of feeling. Because even when you cut out tags of clothing, you know yourself, it leaves that kind of like little jaggedy edge. So if we can actually buy clothes that are tagless, then you know that's even better. Okay. Think about no scents. So think about, can you buy a fabric conditioner or washing powder that actually has a very limited scent? Because again, if you've got a child that is hyper olfactory, so hyper smelling, that might be a big no-go area. So you might have bought them a top, you know, a Peppa Pig top that you know they love the fabric, it's not going to cause a problem. You've run it through the washing machine and now they won't wear it, okay? And it could be because of the smell that's actually now trapped within the fabric, okay? Stock up. A lot of parents tell me if you find something, buy it in every colour, okay? So if it works, buy lots of them. I know I do that with shoes. If I find a pair of shoes that I love, I buy them in every colour. It's exactly the same for our young people, okay? So if something works, buy it before it either gets discontinued or you know, it goes out of fashion or whatever, okay? So stock up is really important. The next thing I want to talk to you about, which we mentioned in these videos before, is desensitization. So this is where we actually kind of over time prepare the body to cope with different textures and things. So it's a really, really important technique, and it should ideally be done alongside an occupational therapist. So you do kind of need more specialist advice around this, but it can be amazing in terms of desensitizing the skin. So part of desensitization, there's something called the Wilbarger brushing program, which is different kind of brushes that are used. They could be used every couple of hours for 2 to 3 minutes, and it's a brushing program. So it's about rhythmic, firm strokes for the child or the adult to help actually desensitize the kind of the skin, basically. Okay. You can also use joint compressions. So I know some of my families have been shown how to do these from OTs and people involved in the past. But what that again will do is help desensitize that area. So if you are trying something new or a new item of clothing, doing this type of thing, brushing or joint compressions before you try and put it on, can actually help. Okay. The other thing is messy play. So I know some young people will not touch stuff at all, so they won't do painting with the hands, they won't touch the sand or the water play, and that's fine, but it can be really beneficial in terms of actually desensitizing the sensory systems. So starting off first of all with something that's very dry. So start off with a texture like rice, for example, that's very dry, and then you move to the middle of the ground stuff like I don't know, rice with a little bit of water in, and then you move on to the wet stuff. So then you look at like your shaving foam and your gloop and your corn flour and things like that. Okay, so messy play can actually be really beneficial for individuals with autism. Okay, Hi Michelle, thanks for joining. I've just seen you've popped up. Nice to see you. We're just nearly finished, I'm afraid though, but you can watch it on repeat. The next thing to think about, which I suppose can be sometimes very difficult, is speaking to your child's school. So we know that for our kids, if they are hypersensitive from a tactile point of view, it's going to cause them a problem when they're in school. So if they're sitting in, I don't know, a maths lesson and all they can feel is that really tight collar around the neck or the tie around the neck, they're not going to be able to focus on their work, they're not going to be able to do that. So it's really important that we have them conversations with our school to say, you know, this isn't just a child that wants to go in their favourite t-shirt, this is a child potentially that is finding it very difficult to manage because of this collar around the neck or, you know, the buttons on the shirts. I know particularly, you know, I've mentioned before my brother, he really struggles with long sleeve shirts, so he just refuses to wear them, and that's because of the button around his wrist really irritates him because he can feel it all the time. And I've actually seen him where he has had to wear a shirt for whatever reason, and he's unable to focus on anything else because that's all he can feel. Okay, so sensory issues are real. And they affect our children in a very real way. So you are quite within your rights as a parent to go to the school and try and explain that actually this isn't my child that's being naughty or, you know, trying to be different in some way. This is my child that has got sensory challenges and they're having a real impact on them. Okay?